It's Thursday, April 11th, 2011. I'm Rim, and this is Geeknights. Tonight, SNMP and how nobody knows how to freaking use it.
Let's do this.
So as I walk into work, there's blue tape covering the lock to the door to my suite.
Your suite.
One of our many suites, and there's just blue tape over it.
I guess you're fired.
So it's just open. It's holding it open. It prevented the door from locking. So I'm like,
Somebody forgot their key.
So I look around, and there's nobody around because it's, the butt crack of dawn, and I'm not really worried about thieves or anything.
Because it's not your shit.
Well, no, more because we have doormen, and it's actually a relatively secure building, and very few people even have access to that floor, let alone, anyway. So I go into my office, lights are off, and I look around, there's nothing, and then I see an email. I go to email the building and be like, what the fuck, dudes? Who left our door open? What are they doing? And there's an email from the building, and they're like, hey, we're busting into everyone's suites to do surveys to install sprinkler systems for fire suppression as has been mandated by New York City.
All right.
But the fail there is that I now know that my building does not, in fact, have active fire suppression of any kind.
All right, so
That sucks.
my apartment does.
My apartment does too.
So does the building I work in.
The building I work in apparently does not. I didn't think that pre-war meant pre-World War I.
No, pre-war does mean pre-war. I mean, they're not talking about, Persian Gulf here.
Well, the joke I always make, and I'll make it now, is people always say like, oh yeah, the building's pre-war, and I interject and say, yeah, civil.
Yeah, it means don't live there.
Well, it was a double joke because until recently the building was named the Lincoln Building.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's named One Grand Central Plaza because Lincoln had a bad connotation.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't like my building.
Sure. I mean, it's not like it was...
What I do like is that it's like 70 degrees today.
Yeah, except, why is it got to be trolling, being like...
Yeah, I get up
in the
sun
morning...
is shining, the birds are singing. I'm like, shit, son, riding my bike to work
No,
tomorrow.
in the morning, you wake up, it's like fucking fog. Look at the weather, it's like fucking rain. It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain.
Yeah, I didn't look at the weather. You know what I looked at, though? It was like 60 degrees.
Yeah. Asshole weather.
Because I can bike in the rain, but I'm not rollerblading in the rain.
I can bike in tiny rain.
See,
like a couple drops.
Because my building sucks ass, I can't ride my real bike because I have to leave it outside. I'm not leaving a multi-$1,000 bike out on the street in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting my old, mountain bike stolen in the past. I'm fixing it, and I'm going to ride that to work. If someone steals it, whatever. It's already been stolen. The fact that I even have it is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it can handle the rain pretty well because it's a goddamn mountain bike.
Yeah. Anyway, there was, so for lunch today, right? I'm walking around, looking around.
Walking around, looking around
for something to eat. And there was this...
That's what lunch usually is.
Yeah, and there was a truck that was there that the last time this truck was there, it had a huge line. But this time, today, the line was like non-existent. So I go to the truck. It's called Bien Dang. It's Taiwanese food, right? And I got some chicken on top of rice, right? Which is fried chicken. But also, next to it, they had dumplings, $3. So it was like $10 gets you chicken and rice.
How many dumplings for $3?
4.
Not too bad. Midtown, it's like $7 for 3 or 4 dumplings.
Yeah, there's actually a dumpling truck that charges more than that.
Of course, Emily's got it the best in Chinatown. It's like, give me $1, I'll give you more dumplings than you can possibly eat.
Yeah, but anyway, the dumplings are pretty good. They had, dispense your own dumpling sauce, whatever. But the chicken was also quite good. It was, high quality fried chicken leg. Right?
All right, I'm curious if this is going anywhere other than I ate at a really good food truck.
No, but the best part of it, right, was that the way they had prepared this somehow, right, with the chicken on top of the rice, is that the rice ended up absorbing all of this fried chicken grease. So it was like, it wasn't sticky rice, right, because it wasn't sticky. It was, it was as sticky as rice is. It wasn't.
So it was soaky rice.
But the intense absorbed grease flavor, it tasted like sticky rice times 2 powers, even though its stickiness was not at that level.
I really suddenly want sticky rice.
So it's
real
like I ate
bad.
some dumplings. I was like, good dumplings. I ate some chicken. I was like, all right, good fried chicken.
It's like in that atomic.
And then I ate the rice. I was like, all right.
This is not good. It's just like when I was in that atomic trivia show, and Ro was like, "Yeah, Dave Riley just said that he's eating chicken
Chicken
gyros."
shawarma?
Yeah, he's like chicken gyros. He's like, "You all want them right now, don't you? Chicken gyros with tzatziki sauce."
I had falafel with everything last night. Huh?
I ate at 5 Napkin last night
Uh-huh.
because I really needed some burgers.
They don't actually require 5 napkins, though.
No, but they require
Talk about your false advertising.
They really require 1.5 napkins. I can say that.
It would require less than 1 napkin if they would just give you a bun that didn't suck.
How come nobody can make buns that don't suck?
The burger truck that I go to has the excellent bun.
Excellent. Really excellent or just really good?
Like the best.
I don't know if it's the best.
It's like,
I don't know. Best, I mean, best is when you're getting into the territory of like custom Kaiser roll situation.
I'll tell you what, the truck is going to be at 50-something Park. You can go over to it.
I will go over to it.
I'll tell you what, you go follow it on Twitter and you'll go over there.
So not that long ago, I bought Adobe CS4 with Emily because I needed Premiere, as shitty as it is, and I bought Audition separately because Adobe was stupid.
I knew better. I never pay for any Adobe product.
Yeah, I needed Audition, and I actually really did need Photoshop.
I think I'm just going to run the pirated shit inside of a virtual machine.
I use Photoshop enough to where I kind of wanted it legit on my computer.
I'm going to pirate it inside a virtual machine.
Mainly because the GIMP really actually sucks.
You could use paint.net.
Yeah, because that also actually really sucks.
It can make funny Photoshops.
Yeah, it's not going to make...
It's got impact font. It's all good.
See, I realized that the line between professional, like needing real software and not for drawing, for me at least, came down to CMYK. If I actually have to interface with printers, anyone who's prints stuff, I really can't get away with anything open source because it just can't do it.
Only send them PDFs. It'll always work.
Most people, good printers, won't accept anything like that.
Yeah,
and if they do,
depends what you're printing.
No, and even if they do, usually they'll require the PDF to be in very specific formats with Pantone colors and all this stuff that you just can't do with open source.
Pay someone else to do all your photoshopping.
Yeah, and you know what? Places like that cost 4 to 10 times as much. There's a reason I can buy like 1,000 to 5,000 full color 2-sided glossy postcards for like $30 because I do all the work. Except the printing. But they announced there's going to be Creative Suite 5.5.
Wait, so you have 4?
I have 4.
So 5 is already out?
So 5 came out recently. I bought 4 near the end of its fucking life.
Oh, good job.
Which is fine because apparently there's some sort of amnesty thing where I can get an upgrade for cheap or whatever. I got to look into that. But... So 5.5 introduces the subscription model, which is basically...
does that mean it's actually affordable?
It's like 70 to 100 something a month forever.
A month forever?
Yeah.
But for that amount of money, you could just get it. What's the actual price per month?
Fuck, it depends on which one you get. You know how they have like 1 million different packages?
Oh, okay. Jesus Christ.
I mean, I have production premium because
I
I needed like Audition and Premiere.
So what if I just want Photoshop? Is it like $5 a month?
It's like 30, I think.
What?
35.
30. For 30, I can get like 3 $10 games on Steam forever.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
But the subscription model is not...
I'll give them $30 a year.
Ignore the prices. Ignore what they're actually charging. Because of the subscription model, I think, is a great idea for this kind of software because they're in a situation where you would like to make improvements, but the software is already good enough for the majority of its users to where they'll never buy it again. And they have a model currently where if you buy it again and you don't buy every iteration along the way, you have to buy the whole thing again, and it's a lot of money. So a lot of people, I know, we're still on CS2 or CS3. So a subscription model would make sense because then you're basically paying Adobe to continually improve the product forever, even if they don't make like these monumental improvements anymore. And you get support, even though their support is kind of useless. And
yeah, but if you don't actually need those improvements, you could just buy a version and use it for 10 years and you'll actually save a lot of money.
So occasionally you might need the improvements because like if you look at Premiere from several versions
right,
ago,
but the thing is like
it sucks more, which is amazing that is possible.
Right, but do you really need the improvements? Like obviously any improvement, if you're actually doing real work, will make things easier on you.
Well, here's my thing.
Could you get the job done without that improvement? And would that improvement help you enough to be worth the exorbitant price that you have to pay for it?
Well, here's the thing. One, for enterprise...
It's like, yeah, this will save you a half hour for $300.
Scott, one, you're forgetting that if you're a company, if you're large...
Well, if you're a company, of course, just pay for everything. Who gives a shit?
even for individuals, if you have money or you're like self-employed and generating revenue, it's really
Yes,
not
if
that
you're
expensive.
rich, just buy everything. Duh. We're talking about people who aren't rich.
Yeah, and it's all I'm saying is that you upgrade when there's a feature you need, or you upgrade a lot. I learned this. A lot of people when I was tweeting were responding to me and emailing me. The main reason they keep upgrading is that they do design work for clients who themselves always upgrade to the newest version immediately and then have backwards compatibility problems and forward compatibility
They
problems.
do that on purpose.
Yeah.
You know they do.
So basically, jackasses upgrade, so the designers who have to support the jackasses then have to upgrade, even though neither one of them needed anything in the upgrade.
Adobe made it purposefully incompatible with the previous versions to force those cross upgrades.
Yeah, Office is slightly better at that than Adobe. They're less evil, though I still disagree with... Anyway, what at least is good is that I had to buy Audition separately. I bought Audition a long time ago because, Cool Edit didn't run so well anymore on modern computers, and Audition is 90% the same as Cool Edit. I'm not really getting anything for my money. It costs a lot more than Cool Edit did. But they had Soundbooth, which was basically, if you're an idiot and know nothing about audio, but you were required to interact with audio in order to make video or some other thing work. It was like the baby version of Audition. You're better off using Audacity.
So it was worse than Audacity, but it cost how much money?
Like $70, I think.
Okay. Jesus Christ.
Wasn't that much money. But for
a lot
some
more,
reason,
$70 more than Audacity.
they included it with all the suites. Like Premiere Premium came with Soundbooth, and Audition was completely separate and didn't integrate at all, which was stupid. And I remember reading on Adobe forums, a lot of people were like, yeah, Audition is going to be end of life. Soundbooth is so much better. Well, no, actually, Soundbooth is now end of life and gone because it was stupid. And now Audition is the only audio software in Adobe land, which is good. And for the first time in fuck ever, they seem to have added a real feature, which I'm kind of amazed.
What real feature could they possibly add?
Surround sound support.
Wait, so they finally added a real feature, something that they should have added 10 years ago.
So you say they should have added it. Name any audio editing software that has surround sound support. Like I can just do 5.1 and DTS and whatever.
Some of the open source ones theoretically have it. If you're a god, you can make it work. It's in there somewhere.
In the same way that LaTeX is a 100% replacement for Word.
That's right.
Technically correct. The best kind of correct. But they added a feature, and for a second I was like, oh, surround sound, and then,
no one has surround sound working properly except Scott Rubin.
And even then, doesn't buy you that much.
It actually buys you a lot when you get something that's, correct.
Like what?
You put a DVD with actual surround sound in the Xbox versus watching something on Netflix streaming. Big difference.
Yeah, but I watch everything on Netflix streaming.
Yeah, but it's like when you're in the movie theater and the Star Destroyer comes from behind. It works. It's pretty cool.
Of course, you could do this. A similar
and it's not
thing.
the thing with surround sound is you say there is a difference. How big is the difference? Kind of big. It's not enormously big, right? But it's big. The thing is, it's just so cheap. It's not like, a 3D TV with the glasses that'll cost you thousands. You can get surround sound working properly for like a couple hundreds.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a sound system already, why the fuck not?
Honestly, the only reason
the main problem is that a lot of people actually do have surround sound, but they don't actually know how it works and they hook it up wrong.
Usually they have center channel coming out of all their speakers.
Or they don't set it up properly, and it's actually this, it takes knowing and doing to actually get it to work right.
Yeah. But anyway, it's supported, which is interesting because that Super HD camera that I have that we've been doing our videos with, it actually records 5 audio tracks.
Yeah, but how does it record 5 audio tracks from one microphone?
It has 5 microphones.
Really?
Yeah, directional.
No, but the thing is, you would need 5 microphones, 2 behind you and 3 in front of you.
They just point in different directions. That's usually how you record surround sound.
Uh-huh.
In fact, I can do stereo miking. What do? I take 2 mics and I put them in like an X.
Yeah, but that's stereo. We're talking about surround. You got to get the front and the back. You can't have.
So Scott,
what part of the camera is behind the thing that you're filming?
Scott, usually surround sound is relative to where the camera is.
But then it's
in
not,
the soundscape.
But the idea is that surround, right?
Yes. So it knows what was the audio coming from the front, what was the audio coming from the back. And if you master it right, it's almost indistinguishable from having point sources in all those places.
Yeah, so you'll hear what's going on behind the camera where no one can see. The thing is, you want the things that, are behind what you're looking at, but
Oh,
still
wait,
something
so Scott,
you can see.
you're saying that what you want to do is make a pseudo-realistic acoustic environment to make the scene feel more realistic without doing actual surround of what the real scene was like. Kind of like Foley, where you make the fake sounds that sound more real than the real sounds in a movie. That's what you can do with Audition now.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can't do it with your camera.
Uh,
If all the microphones are in the camera.
Scott, because it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
Because you don't do that for movies or anything. You do that in the audio software after the fact. If I want to record surround sound with my camera, what it does is it gets a surround picture that will translate into surround sound. So if I play it through a surround system, I hear audio coming from behind me that became from behind the camera, and from in front of me that came from in front of the camera. And because of the amplitude of all these different things and all the different mics, it's as though I'm standing where the camera was.
Right, but you don't want it to be as though you're standing where the camera was. You want it to sound like where the character in the film is standing, not where the
Not
camera
always.
is
It
standing.
depends on what you're doing. I mean,
It's true, but I mean, for example, though, right? You're seeing the Star Destroyer come from up above.
yeah, so Scott,
Right, but you don't want the sound.
I guess I'm not understanding what you're trying to argue, because if I'm making a movie, I'm just gonna do all the audio after the fact anyway, because there isn't a real Star Destroyer coming over for me to have a microphone to pick up.
If you're pointing the video camera,
I don't need a microphone on Han Solo's butt because the Star Destroyer is not coming. There's no real Star Destroyer, Scott. It's not real. It's fake.
if you're pointing your video camera at a helicopter, right? You want sound from the helicopter to sound like, to come from behind and also the front. But since the helicopter's completely in front of you,
Scott,
it's only hearing it from the front.
Usually if I'm pointing the camera at a helicopter, it's because I'm showing a scene of a helicopter, right? Usually you want the audio coming from the perspective of the camera, unless you're doing it anyway.
You want it to come from where the person is standing.
But there's no person. There's a helicopter.
The person in the helicopter.
Scott, have you ever watched a movie? If a helicopter flies by, you hear the audio go, yeah, left to right.
Yes.
In front of you, not behind you.
No, it would be straight on top of you.
But it's not straight on top of you.
No, because even though you're looking at it on the screen, it's whatever.
Scott,
you don't get it.
No, I do get
A
it.
TIE fighter comes over the top, right? You see the TIE fighter, but it still sounds like it's behind you because it's still at the top of the movie screen. And then when it gets to the bottom of the movie screen and it's all the way forward, then it sounds like it's in front of you.
Yeah,
But
so
the TIE fighter is still on screen in front
Scott?
of you, but it still sounds like it's behind you because it's still on its way forward.
Yeah, and it'll
But
be...
if all of the microphones are in the camera and the TIE fighter comes over the top, the TIE fighter's already in front of you by the time it's at the top of your shot, and that it already sounds like it's in front of you when it should still sound like it's behind you.
Because that's fake effects as opposed to recording the actual
That's
environment.
what you use surround sound for when you're making a movie.
No, because most consumer cameras are starting to have surround sound support because people record the actual immersive environment of the camera.
Yeah, you don't want that.
I'm
Unless you're
not,
making nature films.
I'm not sure what you're trying to argue. So anyway,
You don't want all the cameras in the microphone.
actually, in most cases that anyone using a hand camera has,
I mean,
yes,
all the
you
microphones in the camera. No.
do. Yeah, you do.
No, you don't.
Okay. So do you have any news?
I do have this excellent news. You ready for this? It's actually fascinating.
All right.
So, 323 years ago, this guy named William Molyneux, I don't know if he's related to Peter Molyneux, but it doesn't matter, right? He wrote a letter to someone you know, John Locke. And he said, hey, John Locke, what's up? And John Locke was like, what's going on? And he says, hey, imagine there was a blind person, right? And this blind person had a cube and a sphere. And the blind person felt up the sphere real good with their hands. And they felt up the cube real good with their hands, right? So the blind person knows what a sphere looks like, and they know what a sphere feels like, and they know what a cube feels like. But they obviously don't know what they look like. They've been blind since birth. They've never seen a sphere. They've never seen a cube.
Yeah.
Right? Now, imagine this blind person knows what a sphere feels like, and can identify a sphere, right? You could hand them an object and say, what's this, sphere or cube? And they could say sphere by feeling. But not by looking, because they're blind. They've always been blind. They've never seen one. Then you give them their sight back, okay? So now they can see again. And you show them a sphere and a cube. But you don't let them touch, right? And you say which one is the sphere and which one is the cube. They can see for the first time.
Well, we know in modern times what happens.
They felt a sphere and they felt a cube, but they've never seen them.
Yeah.
Right? But now they got their sight back and you show them a sphere and a cube. Can they identify which one is the sphere and which one is the cube without touching?
I'm pretty sure no, because every study I've seen shows that people who regain sight who never had it before really can't parse what they're seeing if they experience something that doesn't make any sense.
Well, basically, no one actually had any idea. There was basically arguings of nature versus nurture and all sorts of, right? And nobody knew until actually just now, this study that just came out. And what they did is they had a hard time finding, because it is possible to cure some kinds of blindness.
Yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of the kinds of blindness that are from birth, in the Western world especially, we cure them immediately, right? When you're like a little baby. So you can see at, day 2 if you can.
To paraphrase arguments we had all weekend, Skinner box is the answer.
Right. So what they did, though, is they actually went to poor places like in India and such, and they found some people who were blind since birth but curable. And they did this. And it turns out that, no, they can't tell the sphere from the cube.
As expected.
But after like a very short amount of time, like weeks, maybe a couple months, they can tell.
That makes sense.
Even if they're actually pretty old, like 8 to 17 years old, whatever.
Ancient.
Yeah, but that's a long time to be blind, 17 years, right? They can reconnect their seeing to their feeling senses after just regaining their seeing senses. After never having them ever, and then they can feel and see the cube and the sphere, at the same time.
Not bad. Now the question is, can they walk in a straight line?
No, the point, no. But the point is, right, the reason it's so fascinating is because, there are lots, for the longest time, people kept thinking, the brain stops developing. It develops a whole bunch when you're young, and then it doesn't. It slows down. But more and more, all the evidence is showing that, like, no, the brain really doesn't stop. It's going all the time.
I read a
Don't
study.
worry, you can learn stuff when you're old.
I read something
Don't worry.
not that long ago that was talking about the fact that there's a strong correlation between how much sleep you feel that you need. Not so necessarily how much you get, but how much you need and how much you're continuing to learn things. Because generally people sleep a lot when they're young, and it kind of peters off when they get older. And really old people often only sleep 5-6 hours a night. Mm-hmm. And there's a possibility that they need less sleep because they're learning less, and the brain needs to do less at night. It was just a neat thing. I don't remember even where I read it.
Yeah, but, this is like a lot of people, the other thing the article talks about is how, a lot of people think that this is idea of when you're a child, there are these critical periods. So, like, if your brain is fucked up, it's like, oh, that's it. We had this one chance where you had, all this potential, and you were like clay, and then you get hard. Well, that's really not nearly as true as we thought it was. Your brain is clay. It's not like there's no like period where, it's in the kiln, the game over.
Yep.
That does not happen.
Well, at least we know, your brain is clearly wood as opposed to my magnificent marble brain.
I'm sure.
So I do want to talk about this
Yes, my
briefly.
wood brain that will continue to grow and get sunlight and water, and your marble brain, which
that is already perfect and
hard
logical.
and small and smooth with
Hey.
no wrinkles in it, and impenetrable and stubborn and non-growing and not adapting.
So Google's algorithms lost a defamation lawsuit in the EU, and this is actually really disturbing and bad news for technology around the world and free speech. Basically what happened is that in the US, we have libel and slander laws.
But they're pretty weak.
Well, I think they're actually fairly strong.
But they're weak relative to, for example, the UK.
Let me finish. They're very strong in that they're well constructed, because at its core, libel and slander, a primary solid defense against being accused of any of these in the courts, is truth. It's not libel if you're right and you can demonstrate it. It's not slander if the thing you said is true.
That's right.
Scott has a tiny penis.
It's a slander right there.
Now, clearly, if I go
we have measured.
So if we go to court, right, and I've said Scott's penis is tiny, and he says, no, that's not true, it's slanderous. When I demonstrate to the court that, in fact, it is tiny, I get off.
Yeah. You get off, huh? You get off on tiny penises? Well, you're not getting off on mine because it ain't tiny.
So in the EU, especially in Britain, this is not the case. And I'm not a lawyer, but everything I read indicates that libel and slander laws in most of Europe are just
the worst.
They're I can't even describe how outrageous they are.
But they balance off because they also have a lot more. They balance out because
judicial discretion.
Yeah, if you're litigious over there, you're just gonna get fucked because they got stuff like loser pays and stuff like that. Whereas over here, we don't have. If we had.
Anyway,
We got to trade.
Anyway, the EU has safe harbor provisions where if I'm, say, a search engine and you find something slanderous through me, it's not slander on my part.
Yeah, it's obviously duh.
But Google had autocomplete. Autocomplete auto-completed someone's name with, if you kept typing words like con man and fraud. And as far as I can tell, the person, because a bunch of people did some research,
is probably
actually a con man.
Yes, there's no doubt.
So Google
doubt.
was sued under the grounds that because Google created that content as opposed to simply reporting it, that they were liable for libel.
Yeah, lawyer doesn't know computers.
Well, the lawyer did know the law.
I mean, judge didn't know computers.
As did the judge, because the laws are stupid, and because autocomplete was supposedly information created by Google that did not exist on the internet itself.
No, it wasn't.
That they are in fact guilty, and they already lost the lawsuit.
Yeah, well, they got to appeal or something.
And this is one. I mean, it bothers me. The EU has been going after...
I would just refuse to pay. What are they gonna do?
Google has a corporate presence in the EU. It has several that would be very difficult to shut down.
Yeah, so what are they gonna do?
They're gonna have to pay giant fines.
No,
probably.
I mean, what if you just don't pay? What are they gonna do?
The same thing they do to anyone who doesn't pay.
Which is?
It's law, seize assets, arrest people, whatever remedies the law prescribes.
Who can you arrest? It's a company. You can arrest Larry Page?
They could shut down the company in Spain, for example. They could issue an injunction against Google servers
The thing is, they don't actually need to be in Spain. They just have computers.
They have people in Spain, too, you realize.
They could just have all the people leave Spain. And
yeah, they could try to pull out all their, shut down all of their presences in Europe. That's a stupid and laughable idea.
No, you can keep the presence. Just move the computers out and the people out. And then people in Europe still Google.
Yeah, but then you don't have a presence in the country for a lot of other useful reasons. It's a terrible idea, Scott.
If I was Google, I would buy an island and just be like, no one could touch me with any law. That's
what island are you going to buy?
I would make an island.
So
use the water for cooling
the trouble is
servers.
that the EU has been doing this a lot lately, and there are tons of antitrust lawsuits coming out of Europe against people like Google and Microsoft that they're laughable. There's no other way to describe them. It's like Europe is collectively trying to stop any technological company from doing anything cool on the internet.
Well, the thing is, right, is look at what's going on, right? All the big tech companies are in the US, Japan, right? Europe had what? Nokia, which is going...
We also, despite the problems we always complain about with the US increasingly becoming kind of draconian about the internet, we have the freest internet of most of the world. Because
it's a pretty free internet.
Because we have some of the strongest protections for free speech of any place in the world.
Yep.
And yet at the same time, much of the rest of the world does not have these protections. And
their internet's way faster.
And because the internet is primarily a US thing, our companies are starting to butt heads with, Europe and Australia over their bullshit.
I think they're basically just trying to tax US companies. It's like they can't really, it's like all these companies are in the US, so, Google, Facebook, everyone's over here. So we're making out, and they're not making out so well, and we're kicking their asses. Apple destroying Nokia and everything. So
anyway, this particular case is actually Italian, though there was the Spanish one that was very similar recently. And technologically, my take on it is pretty simple. Autocomplete is no different than doing a survey of people. If I was in Spain or Italy or the EU somewhere, and I did a survey, does Scott have a tiny penis? And, say 80% of respondents said yes. That's not really libelous of me, who has done a scientific study or a poll.
No, it's libelous. I should be able to sue all of you because they're all libelous.
The individual people who said yes, maybe.
All the people at once in a class action.
There is no way you can convince me that Google's autocomplete is any different than a survey.
No, the survey taker is off scot-free, but all the people who wrote the wrong thing on the survey, knowing the results would be published.
Now this is why I love technology, because all right, the law should be that, which is great, because individual people out there trying to shut them down would be like whack-a-mole Streisand effect, and we win in the end anyway.
Well, how about this? Here's a good question, right? What if someone asks you, right, how much is something worth, and you have no idea, and you just guess, and you guess wrong? Is that libel?
Well, libel. Remember, libel, at least in the U.S.,
or
requires malice and harm.
Mm-hmm.
Actual
but apparently
malice
not in Europe.
And demonstrable. No, in Europe it's basically...
Right, so in Europe, what if you don't, lie, but you just guess wrong?
I don't know, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah. Because it's like that's basically what Google did is they just guessed. They guessed right, of course. But it's like if you guess right or wrong, it's like you're just guessing. Can you be held liable for slander or libel if you just guess as opposed to knowingly lie with intent to harm and such and such?
I guess EU.
How fair is that?
EU, you're on notice. I'm watching you. I tire of this bullshit. I like the EU in general, and it has many benefits over, say, the United States, but when it comes to law, as fucked up as our laws often are...
Why isn't there just at least one fucking country in the world where the shit is not fucked up?
Scandinavia.
It's still fucked up there. That's part of the EU.
Yeah, but I feel like it's less fucked up overall.
I mean, there are places that are less fucked up than others.
However,
but I'm saying, why isn't there a single place that has no fuck-ups?
Well, Scott, here's my worst problem. The places with the least fuck-ups are also the coldest fucking places.
I know, right? We need a tropical place with no fuck-ups.
I just need Manhattan in, I don't know, the Bahamas.
And Manhattan should be its own country.
Yes, with internet.
Yes.
The internet, in fact, is in Manhattan.
Yep.
So things of the day. We had friends out this weekend. Phil and Chie were hanging out playing games and going to the Mocha and everything. But Phil showed us a video of Douglas Adams giving a speech. And I had never seen this speech. I didn't know much about it.
I'd never seen it either.
It was a talk, and it was also about one of his books that I'd never read.
I'd never heard of.
Most people have only known of Douglas Adams because of The Hitchhiker's Guide.
And all the questions at the end of the video are horrible.
Oh,
well,
well, I'll get to that.
Asking about The Hitchhiker's Guide.
Parrots, the universe, and everything. This is just a fantastic talk by Douglas Adams about parrots, the universe,
Komodo dragons, snakes,
and everything. Trying to buy rubber rovers in China.
Lemurs.
Eyes.
Yeah.
It's great. And the thing is, I used to always say that Douglas Adams was a really good writer. And I have to take that back. He is not a great writer. What he is a great orator. And his books are just writing down the things that he would have said.
Yep.
He is an amazing orator. It's very rarely. We try to watch TED Talks often with the crew when we have people over. And usually a subset of the crew get bored pretty readily or don't want to watch something that's longer than 30 seconds. But this held everyone's attention for a full hour.
Well, there was nobody there who was the kind of person who would lose their attention.
True.
It wasn't like all those other people were there who were like, we can only watch things that are 10 minutes or are just really lame and full of jokes every 2 seconds because our attention spans
This
are
is
short.
not a TED Talk, but it is effectively...
It's on the TED website.
It's been honored. It is now like an honorary TED Talk. They're basically doing this best of the web. Like, this is basically as good as a TED Talk, if not better.
It's better than any TED Talks we have available and ready to post for you right now, so we'll post that instead.
When he stops talking, some questions happen.
And they're all retarded.
If I were you, I would watch the first 2 people who ask questions and listen to their questions because nothing has changed in the last, I don't know, several decades because the questions are basically along the lines of, so you gave this talk and I didn't care about it at all, but what I really want to ask about is some lame joke about the Hitchhiker's Guide, towel.
It's like I give him props for not just being like, shut up, because that's what I do. I'm just like, dude, your question sucks. Go sit
Nobody
down.
can ask questions. Like, it amazes me.
I can ask questions.
I'm going to tell you all a secret. At every PAX or any con where we have actually decided to take questions,
all of them suck.
Not occasionally.
Most of them.
We get good ones, but most of the time, I can't hear you anyway. So I literally just listen until I hear a proper noun.
Mumble, proper noun.
And then I give
mumble.
an answer that is vaguely related to the proper noun.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've heard me answering questions or Scott answering questions on stage, that'll probably explain a lot.
Yeah.
But really, this is amazing, and the questions that are asked at the end are
typical.
Amazing.
Really bad.
All right, so what do you got?
So check this out. I don't know, I'm not really that OCD, but, there are sometimes I get a little bit sometimes I'll step on cracks on the sidewalk, no problem, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, can't step.
Everyone's like that. Yep, what do you do if you're at someone's house and they put the toilet paper on the wrong way? Like, it's just under over.
I don't know why people have this problem with the under over. I don't even notice whether it's under or over.
Really? We debated about that for about 40 minutes the other night.
I don't even notice whether it's under or over at all.
Well, because here's the thing. The vast majority of Americans do it over.
I know.
And it's mostly women who do it under.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Anyway.
I don't even, when I put a new roll on there, I just grab a roll, put the thing through it, and snap it on without even looking. And when I grab for the toilet paper, I don't even look at the, Anyway, so if you're OCD or even just tiny bit OCD or really OCD, here is a very reasonably priced $25 wooden cutting board. It looks to be a high-quality cutting board. It is 9x12, which is a good size for a cutting board. And it is ruled very precisely with, vertical and horizontal lines and measurements. So you can cut your carrots or celery to exact specifications if your knife is sharp.
It's pretty great.
It's pretty cool, reasonably priced, and also a cutting board. So if you need a cutting board, why not get this one? It's fun and nerdy.
And of course, the meta moment. We will be at Anime Boston April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th in Boston.
That's coming up real soon.
Yep, we're doing a bunch of panels, all that stuff. Daryl Surratt, Anime World Order, Gerald. I assume Clarissa. I didn't actually ask them who's coming.
All the nerds.
Mike Toole's gonna be there.
Every nerd. It'll be nerd paradise.
So if you are there, aside from our panels, if you want to just play board games,
we're going to be doing a lot of that.
We're going to bring
Anime
some German
Boston
games.
does have a tabletop room. It is kind of small and usually kind of quiet.
We will either be
it's
there.
It's mostly kids playing Magic the Gathering and Munchkin.
We'll either be there or we'll get a posse and we'll go to the hotel, like right in the area.
Well, it's in the hotel.
Yeah.
The tabletop
But
room.
we'll go to like the lobby of the Sheraton.
All right.
And we'll play some games there.
I think the tabletop room itself will be fine.
It depends. It depends on how much of a posse we get.
Anyway.
The book club book was Michio Kaku's Hyperspace. The episode on that is up.
Yep, it is now Foundation.
Foundation.
By
Every nerd
Asimov.
should read Foundation. I have not read Foundation.
Only
so
the first one. There's like a bunch of them. Make sure you get the first one. Number 1, Foundation. Any other metas? Oh, you should follow us on Twitter. Like, go to twitter.com/geeknights. Because not enough people follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess.
It posts you when there's new episodes, and it posts old episodes and things.
Come on, you gotta make this all high energy. Like, we're gonna be at Anime Boston. Be sure to follow us on Twitter.
What else are we gonna be at? We're going to PAX West the week before Labor Day in August.
You could have been like, if you enjoy Geek Nights, you should be following us at Geek Nights on Twitter. We have an awesome rockin' forum. A lot of people have been joining lately. It's kind of an ivory tower of the internet. Gotta be very assertive.
Uh-huh.
Like Fluttershy.
That was so assertive. Did you see that? Yay.
So we did that show a little while ago on Reading Logs, and the response, as in the questions people emailed me and the questions people posted in the forum, made me realize that when we did a couple of shows on like system administration and the system administrator's toolkit and like the things you need to know, like, grep or VI or, reading logs, varlog, Linux, I think we have a lot more ground that needs to be covered. I don't think people actually know how to administer systems.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, how we could talk about that for years and years and years, but I think it'd be kind of boring if you just be like, okay, so this is how to use this command, and this is how to use this command,
but some of
and
the
this
things
how
are
to
real
use this
fundamental.
tool.
What really bothered me, what got me, was someone in the forum, and they had a good question. They were like, yeah, I totally use logs to save the day. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm not making fun of you, dude, because most big companies in the world, even tech companies, don't even get to the point that you got of checking the logs. So, servers having trouble, and tech guy couldn't figure it out. And finally, someone thinks to look in the Windows event log, and they see that one of the arrays, like the RAID, had a disk that had failed, and there was fragmentation and a big problem, and oh shit, and they replaced it and fixed everything, and they're the heroes. But this, of course, raises the question that why wouldn't you have known about this ahead of time? And I realized that almost everyone I have ever met, hardware guys, software engineers, computer science versus IT, nobody knows what SNMP is, let alone how to use it.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have monitoring systems in place, right? But some of the monitoring systems are most of them actually are prepackaged things that might use SNMP without exposing the user to the fact that it's being used.
Yep.
And some of them actually use really stupid methods or, not completely useless, but much dumber methods than SNMP. Like, to make sure the server's up, just ping it once every few seconds, or make sure the website's up, so try to load the homepage once every minute, and then send an email if it doesn't load or if there's a server error.
Yep. Now, the worst part is that most of the monitoring that people use out of the box, like you buy a Dell server, you get Dell Open Manager. Windows, it's, I think, RDM. I forget even, because I only work with Dell stuff now, so I forgot all the other proper nouns for all the other types of servers. But there's software that you install that can monitor everything. So like if there's a problem, you log into the console through the web and you can see like, oh, the array has failed or that fan has died, or say that a lot of them, IBM servers I know have this. They have an amber light on the front of the box that turns on if there's trouble. And then you log into a management console to see what the trouble was. The light's kind of like the check engine light. And even prepackaged software like that is almost always reactive or passive monitoring, in that it doesn't tell you there's a problem. It's just there after you recognize there's a problem. And I want to talk very specifically about SNMP because unlike a lot of other things where there's a lot of theory I could cover and there's a lot of kind of very complex ground, I can tell you in a few minutes how to use SNMP to trivially monitor anything in Linux.
Yeah, I mean, we have some monitoring stuff, but like usually, like for example, if you use Amazon, Amazon Web Services, you can pay for CloudWatch, which is monitoring, and it monitors your CPU usage and your memory usage and your disk activity.
So does it monitor?
But from your perspective, all it is a bunch of graphs, and you can set it with like, email me if CPU usage goes over 80% for more than a minute and stuff like that. And that's like the extent of the kind of monitoring most people have.
Maybe they're a little more advanced. They use like MRTG. They install that.
Well, MRTG is basically, make your own graphs on your own server instead of letting Amazon.
But you can
make
set
graphs.
thresholds on that. Like if the number of CRC errors goes, oh wait, it doesn't even do that by default. Anyway. So
a lot of these things like Monet and Nagios, right? You basically that you run the Nagios system.
Nagios is actually pretty great.
It's pretty good, but you run these systems and then you have to go out and get scripts or modules that monitor different things. It's like, I need the MySQL database monitoring module, so you go get it and configure it.
And you know what? Those things actually work really well, and that's all SNMP under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just get Nagios and install it and use it, you're using SNMP, and you've half the battle.
Yeah. The thing with SNMP, it's like, they're people, it seems like very, very few places use it and know that they're using it.
Oh,
right?
even worse. So get this. Whenever I talk to vendors, right? Like ticketing systems. So I was looking at ticketing systems, or I want to buy like a server that does something or anything. I always ask them questions like, how does it install? What's the backend database? Can I use it on a different database? Do I have to use fucking Oracle, or can I put it on Postgres? All these questions. And by and large, no vendor I have ever talked to for any product I've ever interacted with can answer any question I've ever asked them.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I always ask is, now first I throw them a bone. I will ask, so how do we monitor this? Just to give them, maybe they have some bullshit proprietary thing. Maybe they've got something. I give them the chance to say, oh, well, if you want to make sure it's up, and then they give me some stupid procedure. Usually their response is, okay. What do you mean monitor? It's up, it's running. I mean, if it stops working, they just have no idea.
I need an email when it goes down if I'm not there and I'm not using it.
My
at that
follow-up
minute.
question is usually, is there a MIB? And to this day, only one company has ever responded with the words, why, yes.
I mean, and the thing is, right, so people don't even know that this is a thing, right? But then there's some other people like me where it's like, SNMP exists. It's the simple network management protocol,
Yes,
right?
very good. You know more than 99% of humans.
Right, but beyond that, it's like, it's this thing. I don't really know how it works or how to see it or use it. It's like, it's sort of like how your computer has an I2C bus. And it's like, what is that bus used for? People know about the USB. They know about the serial buses. They don't know anything about the I2C bus. Your computer has one, and it's there, and there's some stuff on it, but you have no idea. And nor do you know how to read it.
Yep.
Nor could you...
Now, the thing is, I wouldn't expect, like a computer scientist, a coder, even a software engineer, I would not expect you to really know the ins and outs of SNMP unless you were writing software that was big enough to where you wanted to make your own MIB to where it could be monitored directly.
Or software that was actually doing monitoring.
True. Like, say, for example, you were going to write, I don't know, a daemon that does, like, something for our forum. Like, it does some cool real-time thing on our forum. And you wanted to get stats out of it directly. Now, a lot of developers would, like, write CSVs or XML to a place or have counters. You can get, database. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. But you could just provide a MIB and just extend it out through SNMP. And then people can hit SNMP and get the data out of your program. That doesn't interest you at all, does it?
No, not really, because, monitoring, I would use it if it was for data like, how much memory is the program currently using up and that sort of thing.
Not how many calls are being addressed per hour.
Yeah, stuff like that. But I never need that kind of information. The kind of information I need is actually usually the application's actual information, right? I'm not going to write, for example, a content API. I'm going to do that with HTTP and JSON. I'm not going to do that with...
See, now this is why SNMP is important.
With SNMP. And at the same time, right, HTTP and JSON, I could also... It's so much easier to do than SNMP, which would require... learning.
See, now this is the beauty of it. SNMP, as its primary
and it's so
use,
much more accessible,
is basically hardware and software agnostic. It runs it like technically it's a layer 7, in the OSI model application. It is at the top.
So it can't monitor anything below itself. So if there's
trivially, it monitors things below it.
Really? So if there's a problem with MAC addresses, how would it know?
Because it doesn't monitor anything. SNMP is nothing more than a framework.
Right, but that's exactly what I'm saying. Is so you have something that's monitoring problems at level 3, and it finds a problem, and then it sends out SNMP, but SNMP doesn't get through because level 3 is broken.
So Scott, think about your hierarchy of monitoring. If your server doesn't have any communication at all with the outside world, if SNMP stops responding or TCP stops responding, you set up monitoring such that if it doesn't respond, that's the most critical alarm. The server is gone.
Yeah.
We have lost contact with it. So at that point, that's the primary alarm. Say there's 10 problems at the same time. Say you're using 80% of your swap space when you don't, that's above a threshold, right? And the motherboard caught fire and the server stopped running.
Uh-huh.
One of those problems is more important than the other one. It takes precedence.
Yes, of course.
So if there's a problem,
the fire is preventing you from finding out about the CPU usage.
If there's a
you don't care about the CPU.
If there's a more fundamental problem that you would have caught and sent over SNMP, but because something is broken on the way, you can't even send that, then your system is proper fucked.
Right, but here's the thing, right? What if the problem is between, for example, the monitoring server, the one doing the monitoring, and the machine that was going to email you the alert? It's like now there's alerts, but you don't know what they are, and
Scott,
they could be more severe than the fact that your monitoring server can't email anybody.
Scott, that's just a trivial operational concern.
Yeah,
that's just, if you're smart, you set up a secondary network that's just for monitoring and backups.
What if that network, loses access? Then it'll be like, oh my God, everything is down, and really everything else is working. It's just the monitoring network is busted.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're not an idiot, that would be obvious.
It can happen.
Yeah, it can happen. It's really irrelevant.
But the point is that, monitoring, can't always be trusted completely. A lot of people, they see monitoring and they're like, they get an email. They're like, oh no, everything's down. Oh my God. But really, you have to be intelligent.
It actually can be trusted completely if it's set up in an intelligent, reasonable manner. For example, say a server goes down. I get an alarm, a critical red alarm immediately in all the consoles of all the production support people that basically says this server is no longer contactable via ICMP.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning it is dead. Mm-hmm. It cannot be reached through anything, ICMP or other protocols. So assumed is that SNMP is also not responding. Assumed is that no daemon can respond. Now, at the same time, if every server on the network simultaneously has that problem, it collapses all those into one alarm. That entire network segment stopped responding.
Mm-hmm.
So if a network segment goes down, I get a network segment alarm saying that whole segment is down. Every alarm that is subordinate to that alarm is suppressed.
Uh-huh.
So I won't alarm on, I can't contact the Postgres server on server A or server B or server C. I also can't ping server A or server... It collapses them all into one alarm. That's just kind of the semantic design of monitoring.
I don't think anyone, probably nowhere in the world except your company, has the monitoring set up so intelligently.
Yes, I can safely say
I don't even know if Google and Facebook and big-time data centers have the monitoring set up that well.
It's funny because the path I've taken through IT, the hospital had shit for monitoring. But that aside, IBM and the company I work for now probably had what I would consider best of breed monitoring. As in, I do legitimately believe that the way I currently monitor my servers, which I think could be improved greatly, is better than the vast majority of companies in the entire world monitor anything. I'm talking ORs, I'm talking hospitals, I'm talking the financial sector, I'm talking technology, Google, Apple, everyone.
Yeah, I've never seen monitoring that level of sophistication. I just sort of assume that the big data centers in important places have it.
They don't.
But you know they don't. You know they don't.
Scott, here's an example.
I mean,
went
Linode and even like big hosting companies where really smart people work, they just have like the CPU alarm
to
emails.
not name any names, at some point in the last 7 years, I was at a data center where I happened to have some stuff in a cage. And a lot of other companies have stuff in other cages. And I can't get into their cages, but I can see their racks. I can see their servers. Point the first. Nobody has fucking labels on anything except, me. 2, nobody really does cable management very well by and large. 3, almost every cage that I would walk past in data centers
was a rat's nest.
The servers have lights, like red lights, like warning, this server has a problem on almost all the servers.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of walking through a yard where there's a bunch of cars running, and they're all brand new powerful cars. And if you look in the windows of any of them, they all have the check engine light on. Some of them are blinking, and maybe one of them's just smoke's coming out of the exhaust.
When it's off.
So, yeah, nobody does what I do, but you know what? You all want to, and it is so trivial to set this stuff up. You wouldn't even believe it.
And that's the funny stuff is like some of these things, they want to charge you monies for but you can get the same thing for open source and free that's just as good, if not better.
So, very briefly, an overview of SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol. All it is a hierarchy, a tree of numbered notations, kind of like an IP address that point to data. So root like 1.3.6.1.0.1. That's kind of like the base root for sysutil. That's like where almost everything you ever do will be. 136.101. Now, the MIB itself is not actually the number. The number is the OID, which points at like a place of the MIB. So think of it as like a giant IP address where if I query on a server this one number all the way down, it ends up pointing to like the amount of virtual memory that this particular process is using at this time.
So you got to ask for the number. You got to be like, hey, you server, give me this number.
Well, there's 2 ways to do it. Now, a MIB, before I get into how you do that, is kind of a directory. So it basically translates those numbers into names, like DNS. So it'll basically, you'll do something like, sysutil.something.something.cpu. Give me the CPU.
So it's like news groups.
Yep. And for monitoring software, usually you load a MIB, and then if you tell it monitor that device, it knows which particular OID values in this giant hierarchy are relevant to that device.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the underlying BS...
So for example, you have a router, right? Well,
Yep.
There's a zillion numbers, but you don't need to know, for example, a router, how much hard drive space is left.
Nope.
Right? So you ignore those numbers on the router, and there's a list of numbers that are the only numbers you care about
what you do
on the router.
is you go to Cisco and you get the MIB. They have MIBs for just all their devices.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do an SNMP walk, you use a MIB viewer to look at it. It shows you, here are all the things you can monitor, and here's the current values on all your servers.
Mm-hmm.
Or all your routers or whatever.
Here are the numbers you care about on this router, and we have removed all the numbers that you will never care about on this machine.
And there's cool stuff, like some of them, a lot of really complex systems, and Cisco devices do this pretty well, will give you multiple counts. Like say for like number of, CRC errors, like errors on packets. One value gives you the current number, like every 5 seconds, like how many were in the
because there's only
last
so
5
much
seconds.
memory, so it's not good. It can't remember this number forever.
Actually, Cisco routers very specifically always remember things forever. They have counters that never get reset.
What if they overflow, though?
I don't know. They're really big. I've never run into that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Some people reset them whenever there's a typical Cisco thing is whenever you hear someone, this is IT tip of the day, someone ever says, yeah, reset your counters and call me back if it keeps happening. What they mean is reset the error count on a device and then the next day see if there's a non-zero number in that counter.
Because it's like if you haven't looked at the number in a while, you don't know if that number went up today or a year ago.
But like some will return the deltas and they'll reset every time you poll them. So I poll it, it tells me how many since the last time I polled it.
So you got to know which kind your device is, or can you change the mode? Or is it...
Both. It depends on the device. SNMP is just a framework. It's just
so
the language.
So the standards are all kind of flaky, and it's not very consistent. You got to know.
Well, no, because the MIB is kind of the contract. It tells you this is what is at this value.
Mm-hmm.
In excruciating detail, oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 ways to do it. You can do polls or traps. A poll is I've got a server like Nagios that hits an OID on a server. Say I have a thing that returns a 1 if Postgres is running and a 0 if Postgres is not running.
All right.
So I have a watch that every 5 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever just hits that value and makes an alarm for me or sends me an email or whatever if anything other than a 1 is returned. or a 0 or whatever. Exit codes. You can really have it do just about anything.
So the SNMP doesn't broadcast. You have to keep polling it.
Yes.
But
Now, that's poll-based monitoring. There's also trap-based. An SNMP trap is when a UDP packet is sent to a receiver. There's ways to do this with broadcast and everything, but that sucks. Basically, devices...
So you got to program on the device, tell it where the receiver is.
Yes. Almost any device will have this. If it's an old device, any server hardware you buy, like Dell boxes, like the racks and the open manages, you can just type in this IP address or this name and the community string. We'll get to that in a second. So you tell it, send your traps here. And then anytime it has a problem, or sometimes devices will send traps that are just updates, like order came in, or I used a CPU. You can pretty much do anything. So that's kind of more, it's still active monitoring, but it's active from the client. So obviously, if the trap gets lost on the network, you don't get it. If the device fails before it can send a trap, you don't get the trap. So trap monitoring would be more for event-based things. Like you might want to get a trap if, say, you exceed a threshold of CPU usage. But you'd want to have a poll monitoring, say, your database that tells you the database is now down. If you have the database server send a trap before it goes down, well, maybe it seg faults and doesn't send a trap.
Or maybe it doesn't send the trap until after it's down, in which case it went down and now it can't send the trap because it's down.
Yep, and now you're fucked.
Now you're fucked. So you got to have both.
So, community string. There are 3 versions of SNMP as far as anyone would care. 1, 2, and 3. Everybody uses 1. Nobody uses 2.
Wouldn't you use the newer one?
3 is the best, and nobody fucking uses it or supports it, by and large.
That's the way of the world.
Here's the main difference. 1 has basically no authentication or security whatsoever.
So you can just, if you find a device in the world, you can probably just poll all its SNMPs and get all kinds of information without any whatever.
So you've got to, this is an operational concern. You've got to control that with firewalls, with the community string, which is basically...
I guess that's actually good that SNMP is at the high level, so you can actually firewall it pretty easily.
Yes, it's very easy to firewall. But the community string, in version 1, the way
Except, the SNMP of your firewall itself.
The way you do this, by default, it's public on every device.
Yeah.
You send a plain text string in your trap or your server, and then if you poll someone, you give them this plain text string, and if it matches what's on the server, it responds.
So that would prevent people from polling because they basically need to know the password.
Yep,
to poll
unless
you.
they can sniff other SNMP traffic.
If they sniff the SNMP traffic, then they can see the community string.
Which, funnily enough,
which is in plain text,
which is kind of awesome because networks have become more and more switched and segregated. It's actually made SNMP version 1 much more secure because it's actually more difficult to sniff.
Yeah, if it's completely switched and you can't get past the switch, and it's not wireless
but if you're not stupid, you're monitoring the switch. And if the switch goes down, then you know all the devices behind the switch.
That's right.
Yeah. But think about this. Notice how every concern you've raised, there's not a technological solution. There's just a logic solution. How do I want to monitor my system? What's where? It's actually a very non-technical problem to solve in terms of monitoring. The technical part's very small. So version 3 has real authentication, but no one uses it. No one supports it. Don't worry about it.
Or fucking why people upgrade. Come on.
Because SNMP, you realize, is one of those ass-old protocols. You go to the net SNMP website for Linux.
Is there anyone even on? Is there even a community of people who even bother? Or you're the only one left in the world?
It's very similar to the community around NTP.
You're like the only people left.
Yes.
Like 3 people who care.
So, if you want to get this going quick, if you want to monitor a Linux server, make sure you have NetSNMP installed, and it'll give you a bunch of simple utilities, like SNMP get, which you type SNMP get space, an OID, and an IP, and a community string, and an SNMP version, whatever data, and you'll get back the value with that OID. It's just a command line protocol. Now you can do with SNMP walk, which will walk down the MIB in an intelligent way. So you give it an OID, it'll walk down everything under that OID, every sub-branch, and it'll figure out all the sub-branches based on the answers it gets along the way. It'll give you SNMPD, and this is what you want to run. SNMPD is a daemon that responds to SNMP queries. And if you run it, there's etc snmpd.conf. And basically, you can put lines in there where you say OID, script, and a couple other parameters, And all it'll do is if you hit that OID from the outside, it'll run that script with the privileges of root effectively through SNMP's daemon and return whatever you want that script to return.
Sounds like a gaping security hole to me. If one of those scripts has any problems in it whatsoever, I could hit you on that number with and run as root.
Yes, that's why you have to not be an idiot. Now, there are ways. SNMP has a get. It also has a whole set system where you can change values. Like NTP, there's this whole mechanism for sending SNMP traps or polls to change values on your server. Do not use this. It is insecure and it sucks.
Hey, computer, yeah? Change the value of this parameter to /temp/exec whatever, my rootkit dot.
So, if you want to monitor processes, like say you run Apache Tomcat, which is a very common thing, or MySQL. Apache Tomcat and MySQL, that combination is probably run by more people out there than just about anything. So what you do is you install SNMPD and all that stuff, and you run the daemon, and you edit the snmpd.conf, and you'll figure out this file. Read the man page. You guys, I assume, are fairly intelligent. And you'll just write a little script that does a PS and make sure that Apache is running. And that also makes sure that MySQL is running. And then extend that through the MIP. Pick an OID that makes sense, and just say, this OID corresponds to this script. And then install Nagios or something and point it at that OID. And then what it'll do is it'll poll that every 30 seconds, every whatever. Every time you poll it, it'll run that script, which does the PS, figures out if the processes are running, and it'll return all these sub-OIDs. It'll return the string that the script returned. It'll return the exit code of the script. It'll return the system uptime and a million other things. So you just have your monitoring say, if that script ever returns a value that, per the script I wrote, indicates that MySQL and or Apache isn't running, that's an alarm.
That's pretty good. That's actually kind of easy. Much easier than I thought it was.
It's really easy. It's snmpd.conf in Etsy and snmpd.
But you got to write a lot of scripts.
Now.
Or download them from the internet.
Nagios and things like that basically come with a million scripts you can just put on your server.
But don't they come with scripts for Nagios? Do they?
Nagios works.
Do they also come with scripts for SNMPD, whatever?
They're basically the same thing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I could go into more details and whatever, but you guys are smart. You can figure it out. And I think I've equipped you with the tools to start to figure out how to monitor Linux servers.
Can you bind SNMPD to just one of your ETH interfaces?
Trivially.
Okay. Because a lot of times it's like you got the external interface. You don't want anyone accessing your SNMP from the external interface.
Actually, you know what, Scott?
You want it only on the internal interface.
I feel like at some point down the road, we don't want to do boring, actually teaching you stuff shows on a regular basis because people get bored. I feel like we might have to talk about how networking works in Linux, because I don't think many of our listeners know how to use IP tables or IP chains or any of that stuff.
You read the instructions.
Man, IP tables.
Well, you just go to Google, type in IP tables.
Yeah.
How to.
IP tables FAQ.
Yeah.
But seriously, SNMP is really easy to use, and if you learn it enough to where you can, on a Linux server, monitor an arbitrary process and whether or not it's running. Just that, nothing more.
I can do that already.
You will be likened unto a wizard. You will be a god among men of IT because nobody fucking knows this stuff. I'm amazed.
I'm a CS guy. I know it.
Yeah,
just because I know Unix.
Yeah.
And you just told me that there's a script, and I just got to figure out what number to use.
In fact, SNMPD is included by default in most distros. Look in your Ubuntu. I'll bet Etsy snmpd.conf is already there.
I don't know.
I don't know, to be honest either. Do you have one open right now? We could check?
No, I
don't either. I'm actually using CentOS and Scientific Linux more and more. Just
Scientific Linux?
Yeah.
What's in that?
You should look into that.
All right. How scientific could it be?
It's used by sciencey people, by and large.
But does it come with No.
MATLAB
already installed?
I wish. I think we're done. Unlike other episodes, actually, if you guys have questions, I would recommend sending them to us. I could do a follow-up show, like a special where I answer all your SNMP questions. I'll head one off at the pass. If you want to monitor Windows, it sucks. And basically, you're going to have to buy an agent and run it on the server, and that will send the SNMP. This has has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music, Kat Lee for web design, and Brando K for the logos.
Be sure to visit our website at frontrowcrew.com for show notes, discussion, news, and more.
Remember, Geeknights is not one, but 4 different shows. Sci-Tech Mondays, Gaming Tuesdays, Anime Comic Wednesdays, and Indiscriminate Thursdays.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.